She didn't knock the second time. The first knock was soft, polite, like a stranger asking for directions. The second one carried weight. The kind that makes a mother's heart recognize something before her mind does. I was standing at my kitchen sink when I heard it. The water was running over a chipped white plate. Tomato sauce from last night's pasta clung to the edges. The clock above the refrigerator ticked in that steady, stubborn way it always had. Tick, tick, tick. I dried my hands slowly. I don't know why I moved so carefully. Maybe some part of me already knew that whatever waited on the other side of that door would change the temperature of the room. When I opened it, she was there. My daughter, alone, no car in the driveway except mine, no man standing protectively behind her. No wedding ring on her finger, just her, and two small suitcases at her feet. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. She looked thinner, older, not in years but in something heavier. Her eyes carried the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from sleepless nights. It comes from regret. "Hi, Mom," she said. Her voice trembled at the end of the word. I didn't answer right away, because the last time I had seen her, she had chosen him over me, and she had made sure I knew it. Before everything fractured, my life was simple, not perfect, but steady. I had raised my daughter, Renee, mostly on my own after her father left when she was 9. I worked double shifts at the diner on Maple Street. The smell of coffee and fried onions followed me home most nights. My feet ached, my hands cracked in the winter, but I never missed one of her school recitals, never forgot a birthday, never sent her to bed wondering if she was loved. Our house was small, 2 bedrooms. A narrow hallway that creaked in 3 specific places. I knew exactly where to step to avoid the noise when she was studying late. Sunday mornings were ours, pancakes, burnt edges because I always talked too much while flipping them. She used to laugh and scrape the black bits off with a butter knife. "You'll burn the next batch too, Mom," she'd tease, and I always did. When she turned 26, she met him, Palmer. He wore pressed shirts and expensive cologne that lingered long after he left a room. The first time she brought him home, he shook my hand instead of hugging me. His grip was firm, controlled. He complimented the house. "That's charming," he said, glancing at the wallpaper I'd put up myself 15 years ago. Charming, I didn't like the way he said it. But Renee looked at him the way a girl looks at a man she believes will build her future, and I kept my mouth shut. At first, he was attentive. He brought flowers, helped me carry groceries without being asked, called me Mrs. Harper in that careful, polished tone. But there were small things. He corrected her stories when she spoke. "No, Renee, that's not how it happened." He'd laugh when she talked about her childhood dreams. "Small-town imagination," he once said, smiling in a way that wasn't entirely kind. I noticed the way her shoulders would tighten. Just slightly, I told myself I was being protective, overanalyzing. Mothers can do that. Still, something in my chest felt unsettled, like a picture frame hanging just a little crooked on the wall. The night she told me they were engaged, she was glowing. He stood beside her, one arm around her waist. His thumb tapped lightly against her hip. Rhythmic, possessive. "We're moving to the city," she announced. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a discussion. It was a decision already made. I remember the smell of the roast chicken burning in the oven because I'd forgotten to turn it off. "You're leaving?" I asked. Palmer answered before she could. "It's the logical next step, career growth, opportunities." Logical opportunity, words that sounded clean, efficient. But they didn't sound like love. "I thought we'd talk about it," I said softly. Renee avoided my eyes. "We did talk about it, Mom." That was the first time I felt her pulling away, not physically but emotionally, as if I had become something outdated. A chapter she had already read and closed. The wedding was small, elegant, held in a hotel ballroom that smelled faintly of lilies and polished marble. I wore a navy dress I couldn't really afford. Palmer's family flew in from the city. They spoke about investments and properties over champagne flutes. They looked at me kindly but distantly, like I was part of the background decor. During the reception, Renee barely left his side. When I asked for a photo alone with her, Palmer said, "We're on a schedule." On a schedule. As if a mother's moment had to be timed. 2 weeks after the wedding, she stopped calling every Sunday, then every other Sunday, then once a month, each conversation shorter than the last. "She's busy," Palmer would say when he answered her phone. "She'll call you back." Sometimes she didn't, and when I tried to express concern, she grew defensive. "Why can't you just be happy for me?" she snapped once. The words cut deeper than she knew. I had always been happy for her, even when it meant letting her go. The final argument happened on a Tuesday evening. I remember because the rain was heavy and the porch light flickered. She had come to tell me they were selling the house I'd co-signed for her, an investment Palmer insisted on. "You didn't even tell me," I said quietly. "It's our life, Mom, and I'm not part of it anymore." Palmer stood behind her silent, watching. "You're making this difficult," she said. "No," I answered. "I'm asking not to be erased." That's when she said it. "If you can't support my marriage, then maybe we need some space." Space, such a harmless word, but it can stretch miles wide. She walked out that night without hugging me, and for 3 years the space remained. Now she stood on my porch, 3 years older. 3 years quieter. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice was small again, like the little girl who used to scrape burnt pancakes. I stepped aside, because no matter how much time passes, a mother's door does not forget how to open. She stepped inside like someone entering a house that no longer belonged to her. Her shoes paused on the welcome mat. The same one she had picked out at a flea market when she was 19. It still had a faded sunflower in the corner. "You kept it," she said quietly. "I keep what lasts," I replied. The hallway creaked under her weight in the same 3 places. She looked down when it did, almost startled, as if she had forgotten the sounds of her own childhood. I closed the door behind her. The click of the latch felt louder than it should have. She set the suitcases by the wall. They weren't expensive. Scuffed at the corners, one of the handles had been taped. "You can sit," I said, nodding toward the kitchen table. The kitchen hadn't changed much. Same oak table. Same thin curtains above the sink, the clock still ticking above the refrigerator. Tick, tick, tick. She sat where she used to sit after school, the chair on the left closest to the window. Sunlight touched the edge of her face. I could see the faint purple shadows under her eyes. I poured 2 cups of coffee without asking if she wanted one. Some habits never leave. She wrapped her hands around the mug but didn't drink. "I didn't call," she began. "No," I said gently, "you didn't." The silence between us wasn't angry, it was cautious, like stepping onto ice you're not sure will hold. "I didn't know what to say," she continued. And then it felt too late. "It's never too late to knock," I replied, her jaw tightened. Tears gathered, but she blinked them back. She always hated crying in front of people. I waited, because sometimes love is simply allowing the other person time to find their own words. "He left," she finally said. The sentence was small, flat. As if she had practiced saying it without letting it break her voice. "I didn't ask who, I knew when I asked. 6 months ago." 6 months, half a year of silence. Half a year of carrying something heavy alone. "And you're just telling me now?" She nodded once. I thought I could fix it. The word fix lingered in the air. I remembered how she used to fix broken toys with tape, how she believed everything could be repaired if you just held it tightly enough. "What happened?" I asked. She stared into her coffee. "It didn't happen all at once. It never does. He started traveling more," she said. "Said it was for work, investors, conferences." Her voice sounded mechanical at first, controlled. I believed him. I wanted to. The clock ticked. I found the messages by accident. He left his laptop open. She swallowed. They weren't even careful. They didn't need to be. I didn't interrupt. I knew the kind of humiliation that hides inside details like that. "There was someone else," she said plainly. There had been for a year. I felt my hands tighten around my own mug. "Did you confront him?" "Yes." Her lips trembled now, the composure cracking. "He didn't deny it. He said he was unhappy, that I'd changed. I thought about the way Palmer used to correct her stories, the way he shaped conversations like they were presentations. "How had you changed?" I asked softly. I stopped agreeing with him. She let out a hollow laugh. "He said I was becoming difficult, emotional." I felt something old and familiar rise in my chest, the same unease I had felt the first day he shook my hand. "He told me I was too attached to you," she added quietly. That landed differently, as if loving your mother was a flaw. Her eyes met mine for the first time since she arrived. "I chose him," she whispered. The room felt smaller. "I remember," I said. Her shoulders collapsed slightly, not dramatically, just enough to show the weight she had been carrying. "I thought you were jealous," she admitted. The honesty surprised me. "Of what?" I asked calmly. "Of my new life, the city, the house, the money." I let that sit between us. "I wasn't jealous," I said gently. "I was afraid." She frowned. "Of him, yes." She looked down. Why didn't you say it more clearly? I did, I replied. But you weren't listening. That wasn't an accusation, just a truth. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. He said you were trying to control me, that you couldn't let me grow up. Palmer had always been good with words. He knew how to reposition people in a story. I wanted to prove I wasn't a child, she said, so I pushed you away. I reached across the table, then slowly placed my hand over hers. Her skin felt colder than I expected. You didn't prove anything by loving someone, I told her. You only proved you were human. She broke then, not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet, shaking sobs, the kind that come from realizing you've misunderstood something fundamental. I sold the house, she whispered after a while, my hands stilled. The one you co-signed. I nodded. He convinced me it was smart, said we could invest bigger, expand. And did you? She shook her head. He put it in his name, the new property. I signed papers I didn't read carefully. A slow exhale left my chest. He said it was temporary. Of course he did. When I confronted him about the messages, he told me to leave, she continued. Said the house wasn't mine anyway. The humiliation in that sentence was raw. Where have you been staying? I asked. With a friend at first, then a small apartment. I found a job. What kind? Administrative assistant, nothing fancy. There was a hint of shame in her tone. There is dignity in any honest work, I said firmly. She looked at me as if she had forgotten that lesson. I kept thinking, she said slowly, about the night I told you I needed space. The memory flickered in both of us. The rain, the flickering porch light. The finality in her voice. I thought if I came back then I would be admitting you were right. And now, I asked, now I just want my mother. The simplicity of that sentence undid me. For 3 years I had replayed our last argument. Wondered if I had been too sharp, too proud, but hearing her say that now, it didn't erase the hurt, it softened it. You could have called, I said quietly. I was ashamed. Shame is a powerful wall, higher than anger, thicker than pride. I didn't want you to see me like this. Like what? Failed. I leaned back slightly. You are not failed, I said calmly. You are hurt. There is a difference. She let that sink in. The house felt different now, not heavy, just fragile. Like something being rebuilt. Does he know you're here? I asked. She shook her head. He doesn't care. The certainty in her voice chilled me. He moved her in 2 months after I left. There it was, the full cruelty. I felt a flicker of anger then. Not loud, not explosive, but steady. You deserved better, I said. She looked almost startled by the statement. I don't know what I deserve anymore, she admitted. I stood slowly. You deserve a place to rest, I said. For now. I walked toward the hallway. She hesitated before following me. When I opened the door to her old room, the air smelled faintly of lavender. I had kept it clean, not as a shrine, just as a room. The bed was made, the curtains freshly washed. She stepped inside and turned slowly. You didn't change it? No, why? I met her eyes because I never believed you were gone forever. Her hand covered her mouth as fresh tears rose. The years between us did not disappear in that moment, but they shifted. And as she sat on the edge of that old bed, shoulders shaking quietly in the soft afternoon light, I realized something important. This wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of a harder conversation, one about trust, one about consequences, and one about whether love once fractured can truly be rebuilt. I closed the door gently behind her to give her space. Then I returned to the kitchen. The clock was still ticking, but the house no longer felt empty. That first night, neither of us slept much. I could hear her moving around in her old room. The floorboards creaked softly, hesitant, like they were reacquainting themselves with her weight. Once around 2 in the morning, I heard the bathroom faucet turn on, then off, then on again. Grief makes people restless. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the quiet sounds of my grown daughter unraveling behind a thin wall. 3 years ago, I had cried into my pillow so she wouldn't hear me. Now the house held her sorrow instead of mine. In the morning, I woke before her the way I always used to when she was little. I brewed coffee and made toast. I burned the first slice out of habit. I smiled to myself at that. Some things don't change. When she finally walked into the kitchen, her hair was tied back loosely. Her eyes were swollen but calmer. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning." She sat down without asking, like muscle memory had taken over. I slid a plate toward her. She looked at the toast and gave a faint smile. "Still burning it? Consistency builds character," I replied. For a moment it felt almost normal. Almost. She picked at the edge of the toast but didn't eat much. I need to tell you everything, she said after a while. You don't owe me every detail. I do, she insisted. Not because you're asking, because I never listened before. I nodded slowly, and so she began. It hadn't started with cruelty, she said. That was the confusing part. Palmer had always been controlled, strategic, even charming. But after the wedding, something shifted. He started managing everything, she explained. The bank accounts, the bills, even my schedule. At first, I thought it was helpful, efficient. She laughed quietly at the word. He'd say things like, "Don't worry your head about it." Or, "You're too emotional to handle negotiations." Little sentences, small dismissals, the kind that don't bruise immediately but leave tenderness over time. When I got a promotion offer at work, she continued, he told me it wasn't worth it. Why? Because it would interfere with our image. He said my job didn't align with the circles he was trying to move in. I felt a tightening in my chest. And what did you do? I turned it down. She didn't look at me when she said it. I told myself he understood ambition better than I did. There it was, the slow erosion of self-trust. He started correcting how I dressed, she added, said certain colors made me look provincial. Provincial. I had heard that tone before. He stopped wanting to visit you, she said carefully. I met her eyes but didn't speak. He said your house made him uncomfortable. My house, he said, it reminded him of limitations. The words landed gently but deeply. And what did you say? I asked. At first I argued, then I stopped. She traced a small crack in the table with her finger. I thought marriage meant compromise. It does, I said, but not erasure. She nodded slowly. The affair, she explained, hadn't been a dramatic discovery. No lipstick on collars, no secret perfume, just emails, messages, hotel receipts. And when I asked him why, her voice wavered slightly. He said I wasn't challenging enough anymore. The irony of that stung. He said I had become too dependent. I almost laughed, not out of humor but disbelief. He isolated you, I said quietly, then blamed you for standing alone. She looked up sharply. I didn't see it. You loved him. Yes, she whispered. There is a kind of love that makes you doubt your own instincts, and a kind of partner who relies on that doubt. What did he say when you told him you were leaving? I asked. Her face hardened slightly. He didn't think I would. A long pause followed. When I packed my things, he stood in the doorway and said I was being dramatic. And the house? He reminded me it wasn't legally mine. That part still carried shame in her voice. I signed documents, she said. He always rushed me. Said there wasn't time to go over every line. Did you ever talk to a lawyer? I asked. She shook her head. I was embarrassed. Embarrassment keeps many women silent longer than cruelty does. I didn't want people to know I'd been naive. I leaned back in my chair. You were not naive, I said firmly. You trusted your husband, that's not a crime. She looked like she wanted to believe that. But I hurt you, she said quietly. The honesty in that statement made the air shift again. You did, I answered. I didn't soften it, because healing requires truth. I chose him over you. I made you feel small. Her voice cracked. I accused you of trying to control me when you were trying to protect me. There it was, the heart of it. I thought if I defended you too strongly, I said slowly, you would pull away further. And I did anyway. Yes. The words weren't sharp, just factual. She wiped at her eyes. I don't expect everything to go back to how it was. It can't, I said gently. We're not who we were. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't fragile, it was thoughtful. What do you want now? I asked her. She looked uncertain. I want to rebuild. I want to understand how I let it happen. And with me, if you'll let me. That was the real question. Forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a series of small decisions. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the maple tree in the yard swayed gently. The same tree she used to climb when she was 10. You are my daughter, I said quietly. That never changed. She let out a shaky breath. But trust, I continued, takes time to mend. I know. Living here again won't be pretending the last 3 years didn't happen. I don't want to pretend, she said quickly. I want to face it. There was something steadier in her voice now. Growth doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it sounds like responsibility. I'll find a more permanent place soon, she added. I don't want to impose. You're not imposing, but I don't want to run from one dependency to another. That statement surprised me. It told me something important. Palmer had convinced her that independence meant distance from me. Now she was trying to redefine it. You can stay, I said calmly, but we will talk, honestly. She nodded, and for the first time since she stepped through the door, I felt something resembling cautious hope. Later that afternoon, she offered to help clean out the garage. We worked side by side, sorting old boxes. At one point, she found her childhood photo albums. She sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, flipping through them. There you are, she murmured, pointing to a picture of us at the county fair. I looked younger, tired but smiling. You always looked proud, she said. I was. She closed the album slowly. I didn't realize how much of myself I gave away, she admitted. Sometimes, I said, we only see what we've lost when the silence returns. She leaned her head briefly against my shoulder, not dramatically. Just lightly, like she used to when she was small. And in that quiet garage surrounded by dust and old memories, I understood something clearly. Palmer had not just taken her trust, he had taken her voice, and now she was trying to find it again. A week after she moved back in, the letter arrived. It wasn't dramatic, no bold handwriting, no urgent stamp, just a clean white envelope with Palmer's name printed neatly in the corner. He had always preferred typed labels. I found it in the mailbox late Tuesday afternoon. The air smelled like rain again, faint and metallic. I stood there longer than necessary, turning the envelope over in my hands. For a moment, I considered slipping it into a drawer, pretending it hadn't come, but secrets have a way of rotting quietly. And we had already had enough of those. When Renee came home from work that evening, she looked tired in a different way than before. Not broken, just drained, the kind of exhaustion that comes from rebuilding. There's something for you, I said, placing the envelope on the kitchen table. She froze when she saw the name, her fingers hovered above it but didn't touch. He doesn't call, she murmured. He doesn't text, he sends paper. Control, I said quietly, even in communication. She gave me a faint, humorless smile. For a long moment she just stared at it. Open it, I said gently. She nodded and sat down. The clock ticked. The paper tore with a soft, precise sound. Her eyes moved across the page. Slowly, then more quickly. The color drained from her face. What does it say? I asked, though I already knew it wouldn't be simple. She swallowed. He wants to finalize the divorce. The word felt clinical, final, and, I prompted, he's asking me to sign a settlement agreement. Her voice shifted slightly. There's a clause. What kind of clause? She slid the paper across the table toward me. I read carefully. He was offering a modest financial payout, enough to appear reasonable. But buried in the language was something else. A non-disclosure agreement. She was prohibited from discussing any personal or professional matters related to him. And there was another line, a repayment clause. If she contested the property transfer or pursued legal action, she would be responsible for covering legal fees and damages incurred. It was intimidation dressed as formality. He wants silence, I said. She nodded slowly. He says this is generous. I almost laughed. Generous? Did you sign anything before that mention this? I asked. No, then he's trying to protect himself. She looked confused. From what? That's the question. She leaned back in her chair. I don't want more conflict, I know. But I also don't want to walk away pretending none of this happened. There it was again, the beginning of her voice returning. You need to speak to a lawyer, I said. Her shoulders stiffened. I can't afford a long battle. You can't afford silence either. She looked at me uncertain. I don't want revenge, Mom. I'm not suggesting revenge. I folded the letter carefully. I'm suggesting clarity. She was quiet. He always said legal action was messy, that good people handled things privately. Good people don't rush their wives into signing property away, I replied calmly. That landed. She looked back at the letter and something in her expression changed. Not anger, awareness. I think he assumed I wouldn't fight, she said slowly. Have you ever? I asked. She met my eyes. No, the truth hung between us. That night she made the call, a local attorney, a woman recommended by one of her coworkers. Her name was Evelyn Carter. The consultation was scheduled for Friday. The days leading up to the appointment were tense but not chaotic. Renee moved through the house with quiet determination. She gathered documents, bank statements, emails, copies of the property transfer forms she had kept almost absent-mindedly in a folder. Why did you keep these? I asked when she laid them out on the table. I don't know, she admitted. Maybe I knew something wasn't right. Instinct, buried but not gone. On Friday morning I drove her to the law office. She didn't ask me to come in, but but she didn't tell me not to, so I sat beside her in the waiting room. The office smelled faintly of lemon polish and paper. Soft instrumental music played overhead. When Evelyn Carter stepped out to greet us, she looked steady, mid-50s, clear eyes, no unnecessary softness. "Miss Harper?" she asked. Renee stood. "That's me." They shook hands. "Would you like your mother to join us?" Evelyn asked, glancing at me respectfully. Renee hesitated for only a second. "Yes." Inside the office, Renee told her story, not dramatically, not tearfully, just clearly. Evelyn listened without interrupting. When Renee finished, the lawyer leaned back in her chair. "He transferred property into his sole name after marriage," she clarified. "Yes. Using marital assets, yes. And you signed under time pressure without independent counsel?" "Yes." Evelyn nodded slowly. "This isn't uncommon," she said. That sentence alone felt like a quiet validation. "You have grounds to contest," she continued, "especially if there's evidence of coercion or misrepresentation." Renee blinked. "Coercion? If he created financial dependency and rushed signatures, that's relevant." Palmer had always framed his control as efficiency. Now it had a different name, and the non-disclosure clause. Renee asked. Evelyn's lips tightened slightly. "That's designed to protect reputation." "So he's worried about something," I said quietly. Evelyn glanced at me. "Men like this usually are." The word "like this" wasn't said harshly, just accurately. "What would this process look like?" Renee asked. "Negotiation first. If that fails, court." "And how long?" "Months, possibly longer." Renee inhaled slowly. "I don't want to destroy him." Evelyn's expression softened slightly. "Standing up for yourself is not destruction." Silence followed. "You need to decide what justice looks like for you," Evelyn added. "Justice, not revenge, justice." On the drive home, Renee stared out the window. "I kept thinking," she said quietly, "that if I just behaved better, he'd love me better." I felt that sentence in my bones. "That's not how love works," I said. "I know that now." There was no bitterness in her tone, just understanding. When we pulled into the driveway, she didn't get out immediately. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of losing, of finding out how small he thinks I am." I reached for her hand. "He already showed you that," I said gently. "Now you get to decide who you are." She nodded once. And in that moment I saw something I hadn't seen in her in years. Resolve, not loud, not aggressive, but steady. That evening she emailed Evelyn confirming she wanted to proceed. The response from Palmer's lawyer came quickly, too quickly, as if they had anticipated resistance. The tone shifted immediately, less generous, more defensive. They denied any coercion. They emphasized that Renee had signed willingly. They suggested that contesting the agreement would damage reputations on both sides. I read the email twice. Reputations, that word again. What reputation is he protecting? I asked quietly. Renee looked thoughtful. "He's expanding his firm," she said slowly. "Trying to bring in investors. Investors value stability." "Scandal complicates things." "He underestimated you," I said. She didn't smile, but she didn't disagree. And as the legal process quietly began to move forward, I realized something important. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't even just about property. It was about reclaiming her own narrative. For years, Palmer had edited her story. Now she was picking up the pen. The first time Palmer called after the legal notice was filed, it was a Sunday evening. Of course it was. He used to believe Sundays were strategic. People were softer on Sundays, more reflective, more vulnerable. Renee was in the kitchen washing dishes when her phone buzzed on the counter. The name lit up the screen like a ghost. "Palmer." She froze. The water kept running. I reached over quietly and turned it off. "You don't have to answer," I said. She stared at the phone. "Yes," she whispered, "I do." She dried her hands slowly and picked it up, her posture straightened not defensively but deliberately. "Hello?" I didn't leave the room. I didn't hover either. I simply stayed. His voice wasn't loud enough for me to hear clearly, but I could see the shifts in her expression. First irritation, then disbelief, then something steadier. "No," she said calmly. "I'm not trying to hurt you." A pause. "You hurt yourself." Another pause, longer. "I'm not discussing this without counsel." That sentence felt like a quiet milestone. I watched her shoulders relax slightly as she spoke. "No, Palmer, I won't withdraw." Silence on her end as he spoke. Then she said something that made my chest tighten with pride. "You don't get to decide who I am anymore." She hung up gently, not abruptly. Her hands were shaking when she placed the phone down. "What did he say?" I asked. She exhaled slowly. "He said I was being vindictive." I almost smiled and he said I was embarrassing him. There it was again, reputation. He reminded me of everything he'd given me, the language of ownership disguised as generosity, and then he said I'd regret this. She didn't say it dramatically, just plainly. I stepped closer. Do you believe him? She thought about that. No, it was a simple answer, but it wasn't naive, it was grounded. He sounded different, she added. Less controlled. That's because he's not in control. That's what this was really about, not money, control. The legal back and forth stretched into weeks. Evelyn was methodical, precise. She requested documentation Palmer's team hadn't expected to provide. Transaction histories, asset disclosures, business partnership filings. Each request peeled back another layer, and then something shifted. Evelyn called Renee into her office again. I didn't attend this meeting. Renee went alone. When she came home, she looked pale but alert. What happened? I asked. She set her bag down slowly. There were irregularities. What kind? She sat at the kitchen table, hands folded. The property transfer wasn't just rushed, she said. It was structured in a way that concealed shared marital assets. I listened carefully. He moved funds between accounts before asking me to sign. Evelyn says it looks like deliberate asset shielding. A quiet anger stirred inside me, not explosive but steady. He planned it, I said, yes. She didn't cry, that surprised me. Instead, she looked clear. I wasn't just careless, she continued. He positioned everything so I wouldn't question it. Financial manipulation, I said, yes. And then she added something that mattered. He's done this before. I looked up sharply. With a previous business partner, she explained. Evelyn found records of a lawsuit that was settled quietly. Quietly, he preferred quiet. Does the woman he's with now know? I asked. Renee's mouth tightened. I don't know. And for the first time since she'd returned, I saw something close to anger in her eyes. Not jealousy, not heartbreak, anger at injustice. He builds people into extensions of himself, she said slowly, and when they stop fitting the image, he discards them. That wasn't the voice of a victim anymore, that was recognition. The public consequence came sooner than expected. Palmer's firm had been in the middle of securing a major investment deal. Part of the due diligence process required disclosure of ongoing legal matters. The contested divorce became part of the paperwork. Investors don't like uncertainty. Within weeks, whispers began circulating in his professional circles. Nothing dramatic, no headlines, no scandals, just questions. Questions are often more dangerous than accusations. Palmer called again. This time, Renee didn't answer. Instead, his lawyer requested a meeting. Evelyn advised caution but agreed to negotiate. The meeting was held in a neutral office downtown. I didn't go. This was her ground now. She told me later how it unfolded. Palmer looked composed, she said. Crisp suit, controlled expression, but there were small cracks. He avoided direct eye contact. He kept adjusting his cufflinks. He tried to charm the room, she said. Of course he did. He said he never intended harm, that this was all a misunderstanding. And you? I asked. I told him misunderstanding doesn't require non-disclosure agreements. I couldn't help it, I smiled then. What did he say? He said I was overreacting. And I told him clarity isn't overreaction. She held my gaze as she repeated that line. Clarity isn't overreaction. The negotiations lasted hours. In the end, Palmer agreed to a significantly revised settlement. Fair distribution of marital assets. Compensation for the concealed transfers. No non-disclosure clause. The legal language would remain private, but Renee would not be silenced. When she signed the final agreement weeks later, she did it calmly. No trembling hands, no second guessing, just steady breath and a clear gaze. The public consequence was subtle but real. Palmer's investment deal stalled. Rumors circulated about his personal instability. Nothing legally damaging, but reputationally inconvenient. He wasn't destroyed, but he wasn't untouchable anymore either. Renee didn't celebrate, she didn't gloat, she simply exhaled. It's over, she said one evening, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. The clock ticked as it always had. Tick, tick, tick. How do you feel? I asked. She considered. Lighter, not triumphant, lighter. I kept thinking closure would feel dramatic, she admitted, like fireworks. But it feels quiet, I nodded. That's how real endings usually feel. She smiled softly. You were right about him. I held up a hand gently. This isn't about being right. She looked at me carefully. I know, but I need to say it. There was no defensiveness in her tone now, only honesty. I chose him over you, she continued. And he chose himself over me. Silence settled between us, not heavy but thoughtful. I can't undo those 3 years, she said. No, I agreed, but I can choose differently now. That sentence mattered more than anything else she had said, because it wasn't about the past. It was about who she was becoming. After the settlement was finalized, the house felt quieter again, not empty, just settled. The legal papers were filed away in a drawer beside old tax returns and instruction manuals for appliances we no longer owned. Life has a way of placing even the most painful chapters between ordinary things. Renee went back to work the following Monday. She started leaving earlier than she needed to. I noticed that, standing in front of the hallway mirror a little longer, choosing clothes with more intention, not expensive clothes, but intentional ones. One evening she came home holding a small paper bag. I bought something, she said, almost shyly. She pulled out a navy blazer, simple, structured. I've been offered a supervisory role, she added. I felt a warmth spread through my chest. At the office? Yes, it's not glamorous, but it's mine. Mine. There was ownership in her voice that had nothing to do with property. When do you start? Next month. I stood and hugged her then, properly, not cautiously, not lightly, just firmly. I'm proud of you, I said. She held on a little longer than usual. That night, as we ate dinner, she asked something unexpected. Were you ever afraid to let me go? She asked. I looked at her across the table. Yes, she waited. Not because I doubted you, I said slowly, but because I knew the world can be persuasive. She nodded thoughtfully. I thought independence meant cutting ties, she admitted. Like I had to prove I didn't need you. And now I think independence means choosing who stands beside you. That sentence stayed with me. Over the next few weeks she began therapy. She didn't announce it dramatically. Just mentioned one evening that she had scheduled sessions. I need to understand why I ignored the red flags, she said. That takes courage, I replied. She smiled faintly. I'm tired of confusing silence with strength. I had never taught her that silence was strength. But perhaps she had learned it elsewhere, or perhaps she had misunderstood it. Growth often requires revisiting old definitions. One afternoon, about 2 months later, Palmer came to the house. I saw his car pull into the driveway through the kitchen window. Black sedan, polished, controlled. My first instinct was protective, but Renee was the one who saw him first. She didn't flinch. I'll handle it, she said. I stayed inside, close enough to hear but not intrude. He stood on the porch in a gray suit, sunglasses in hand. For a moment, it was as if 3 years had folded back on themselves. But Renee stood differently now, not leaning toward him, not shrinking away, just standing. What are you doing here? She asked calmly. I wanted to speak in person, he replied. His voice carried the same smooth tone. I don't think that's appropriate, she said. I think we deserve closure. She didn't react to that word. We have legal closure, she answered. He shifted slightly. You've changed, he said. Yes, she replied, not defensive, not apologetic, just factual. I didn't expect you to fight so hard, he added. There it was, expectation. I didn't expect you to plan so carefully, she said. A small silence followed. I couldn't see his expression clearly from inside, but I saw his posture stiffen. I never meant to hurt you, he said. That doesn't undo it, she replied. Her voice remained steady. He glanced toward the house briefly. I assume your mother encouraged all of this. That was the old tactic, divide, blame, but Renee didn't look back at me. This was my decision, she said firmly. Another silence. I hope you find what you're looking for, he said finally. I already have, she replied. He hesitated as if expecting more. There wasn't any. She stepped back. Goodbye, Palmer. She closed the door gently, not slammed, not dramatic, just closed. When she turned toward me, her face wasn't tearful, it was calm. How do you feel? I asked. Finished, she said. Finished, that's a different word than over. Finished suggests completion. Learning. That evening we sat on the porch together. The maple tree rustled in the soft wind. The same tree she used to climb when she was small. Do you resent me? She asked suddenly. The question hung in the air. For leaving, I clarified. For choosing him, I thought carefully. I resented the silence, I said honestly. Not you, she absorbed that. I resented feeling replaced, I continued. Not your happiness, she nodded slowly. I thought love was a competition, she admitted. It isn't, I said gently, but insecurity can make it feel like one. We sat quietly for a while. I think I confused admiration with love, she said eventually. How so? I admired his certainty, his ambition. I thought standing beside him made me stronger. And now, I think strength is quieter. She looked at me then, like yours, I smiled softly. My strength came from necessity, I said. Yours is coming from choice. That difference mattered. Weeks turned into months. Renee saved money. She began looking at small apartments nearby, not far, just enough to establish space without distance. One evening, she showed me a listing on her phone. It's small, she said, but it has good light. Light matters, I replied. I don't want to leave abruptly, she added. I don't want it to feel like running. It won't, I said. It will feel like building. The day she signed her new lease, we went out for coffee afterward. She seemed lighter than I'd seen her in years. I used to think coming back here meant failure, she said, and now it feels like foundation. That word filled the space between us warmly. Foundation. Not fallback, not retreat, foundation. When she moved into the apartment a month later, I helped her carry boxes. The place was modest, clean. Sunlight streamed through the living room window just like she'd said. She stood in the center of the room after the last box was set down. No one arranged this for me, she said quietly. No one orchestrated it. I looked at her. That's the point. She turned slowly, taking it all in. This time I chose, and there it was, not rebellion, not reaction, choice. As I drove home alone that evening, the house didn't feel empty. It felt complete. Because this time she wasn't leaving to escape me, she was leaving with me still beside her. After Renee moved into her apartment, the house felt different in a way I hadn't expected. Not hollow. Not heavy, just quieter in a mature way, like a book that has been read fully and placed back on the shelf, not forgotten, just understood. We began seeing each other differently, not as mother and child, but as two women who had survived different kinds of storms. She came over every Sunday again, not because it was habit, but because she wanted to. The first Sunday in her new place, she invited me there instead. I knocked lightly, smiling to myself at the small reversal. When she opened the door, she looked steady. There was a plant by the window, a small bookshelf already half filled, a framed photo of us at the county fair sat on the side table. You kept that? I asked. I chose it, she said, that word again. Chosen. We sat at her tiny dining table and drank coffee. The light in that apartment was warm and forgiving. It softened the edges of things. I used to think coming back to you meant I had lost, she said quietly, and now? Now I realize I lost myself long before I lost him. She wasn't angry when she said it, just clear. Healing had given her perspective without bitterness. I keep replaying the moment I told you I needed space, she added. The memory still lived between us. But it didn't sting the way it used to. I thought you saw me as weak, she said. I saw you as scared, I replied gently. She blinked, surprised. Scared of what? Of disappointing him, of disappointing yourself. She sat with that. I didn't want to be the girl who ran home, she admitted. You weren't running home, I said. You were returning to truth. Her eyes filled slightly, but she didn't cry. We had both learned something important over these months. Crying is not the only language of grief. Sometimes quiet understanding is stronger. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. Renee received a message not from Palmer but from the woman he had moved in. Her name was Marissa. The message was short. Can we talk? Renee showed it to me. Her first reaction wasn't jealousy. It was concern. I think she's going through the same thing, she said slowly. We sat at the kitchen table, my kitchen this time, and considered it. You don't owe her anything, I said. I know, but I wish someone had warned me. There it was. The instinct not just to survive, but to prevent. She agreed to meet Marissa in a public cafe. I didn't go. This was her story to navigate. When she came back later that evening, she looked thoughtful. Was I right? I asked quietly. She nodded. He's already controlling her finances, she said, already isolating her from friends. My stomach tightened. She found out about the lawsuit during due diligence for something else, Renee continued. She didn't know the details. She wanted to hear it from me. And what did you tell her? The truth, not exaggerated, not embellished, just truth. How did she react? She looked like I used to look, Renee said softly. Confused, defensive, still in love. Love makes people resist warnings. Do you think she'll leave? I asked. I don't know, Renee replied honestly. You can't pull someone out before they're ready. She understood that now because she had lived it. I didn't speak badly about him, she added. I just described what happened. That's enough, I said. She looked at me then. You didn't try to destroy him either, she said. Even when you could have? No, I replied, because destruction isn't healing. She nodded slowly. That night after she left, I sat alone on the porch. The maple tree rustled again in the soft wind. I thought about the long arc of motherhood. You raise a child. You protect them when you can, you watch them step into mistakes you cannot prevent. And sometimes, if you're fortunate, they come back not broken but wiser. Months passed. Renee grew into her supervisory role with quiet competence. She began mentoring younger women at work, not loudly, not dramatically, but intentionally. One evening, she told me something that made my heart ache in the gentlest way. "I apologize to you," she said, "but I never thanked you." "For what?" I asked. "For not closing the door." I swallowed slowly. "There were nights I wanted to," I admitted. She looked at me startled. "I was hurt," I continued calmly. "I felt replaced." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know." We sat in silence. "I kept your room ready," I added, "not because I expected you to fail, but because I trusted your heart." Her tears came then, but softly. "You never said I told you so," she said. "There's no wisdom in that," I replied. She laughed faintly through tears. "I think I needed to learn the hard way," she said. "Most of us do." One afternoon, nearly a year after she had first knocked on my door again, we visited the county fair. It was almost accidental. We drove past and decided to stop. The air smelled like fried dough and sugar. We walked slowly through the booths. At one point, she stopped near the Ferris wheel and looked up. "I remember climbing the maple tree because I thought I could see further from higher up," she said. "And could you?" I asked. "No," she smiled. "I just felt brave." She turned toward me. "I think that's what I was trying to do with Palmer, climb higher to feel braver. And now I know bravery isn't height, it's honesty." The Ferris wheel lights blinked softly in the evening sky. She slipped her arm through mine, not like a child clinging, but like an equal walking beside. And I realized something quietly profound. When she had chosen him over me, I thought I had lost my daughter. But what I had really lost was the illusion that I could protect her from every lesson. Now, standing beside her, I didn't see the girl who left. I saw the woman who returned, stronger, not because she avoided pain, but because she faced it. There is something no one tells you about motherhood. It doesn't end when your child grows up. It simply changes shape. When Renee chose him over me, I thought the story was over. I thought love had limits. I thought maybe I had failed somewhere along the way. But what I've learned is this: love is not proven by being chosen first. It's proven by remaining steady when you are not. I could not stop her from marrying him. I could not make her see what she wasn't ready to see. And I could not protect her from lessons that only life itself could teach. What I could do was keep the door unlocked, not in weakness, not in pride, but in quiet faith. Faith that one day, when the noise faded and the illusions cracked, she would remember where she first learned what love felt like. When she knocked on my door with 2 worn suitcases and tired eyes, I had a choice too. I could have reminded her of every sharp word. Every Sunday she didn't call, every moment I felt replaced, or I could choose something stronger than being right. I chose to be her mother. And today, when I see her standing on her own, working, choosing wisely, speaking clearly, I don't feel vindicated. I feel grateful. Because sometimes the greatest victory is not winning against someone else. It's rebuilding what was almost lost. If you've ever been the parent left behind, if you've ever been the child who walked away, let me ask you this. When love is tested by pride and pain, would you leave the door open? Tell me in the comments. And if this story touched something in your heart, stay a while. There are many more stories like this, about family, about mistakes, and about the quiet strength it takes to forgive. Sometimes healing doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives with a knock and the courage to open the door.